Welcome to another session of Environment Studies classes. In this session, we'll be looking into solid waste management, its control measures, climate change, global warming, ozone layer depletion, then about certain acts also. The learning objectives of this session is to understand or to know about solid waste management, to understand about climate change, global warming, and also to understand the impacts on human communities and agriculture, as well as to understand about the different environmental laws and water law, air law, and so on. The learning outcome is that is after the session you'll understand what is meant by solid waste and what is it, how its management is done, what are its control measures. Then we'll also get an understanding about global warming, climate change, and also depletion, and how it impacts the human community and agriculture, and also to understand different environmental laws and associated laws, which is important for the sustainability of life. So over to the session. Solid waste management. Well, solid waste, when we talk about, first we need to talk about solid waste. Solid waste is the useless, unwanted and discarded materials resulting from day-to-day activities in the community. The higher standards of living, rapid population growth, urbanization in developing countries has resulted in the generation of enormous quantities of solid waste. If the waste generation continues in this way, it would result in irreparable, we could say, irreparable damage to the environment. The waste is normally disposed without proper treatment in open dumps, resulting in widespread environmental pollution and degradation. So when we talk about the main sources of waste, we can say that it can be domestic waste, which includes a variety of materials thrown out from homes like food waste, cloth, paper waste, etc. And the commercial waste also, it includes waste which comes from shops, markets, hotels, offices, etc. And the construction wastes, which include wood, concrete, debris, etc. Horticulture waste and waste from slaughterhouses include vegetable parts, residual remains of slaughtered animals, and biomedical waste. It includes mostly waste organic material, then anatomical waste, infectious waste, glass bottle, plastic, metal syringe. All this, a large amount of solid waste is released from the mining activities also. The increase in solid waste is mainly due to overpopulation, affluence, and technological advancement. So these are the main sources of solid waste. So when we talk about the types of waste, it can be mainly divided into biodegradable and non-biodegradable. Biodegradable is nothing but biodegradable waste is decomposed and degraded by microbes, whereas non-biodegradable waste cannot be decomposed by microbes. So the example as given here is for biodegradable waste, it includes vegetable waste, food waste, tea leaves, eggshells, dry leaves, etc. And non-biodegradable includes polythene bags, glass bottles, tins, cans, electronic waste, etc. Now, we need to talk about the effects of solid waste. So as it is stated here, waste heaps up on the road, litter surrounding, foul smell, vector breeding, burning produces toxic waste. In general, we can say that the water gets contaminated due to improper disposal of waste. Solid waste causes diseases like diarrhea, dysentery, typhoid, cholera, etc. And moreover, solid waste modifies the physiochemical and biological properties of plants and animals. And also the groundwater gets contaminated. It enhances the air and water pollution and also provides a perfect, we can say, breeding sites of insect and infectious organisms. Then solid waste management also involves waste collection, transportation, segregation, and disposal techniques. So when we talk about solid waste management, it includes the collection of solid waste, the transportation, the segregation of the waste, as well as the disposable techniques. Now, how do we manage these things? The main is the important steps involved in solid waste management is reduce, reuse, and recycle. That is the 3 R's principle. And when we talk about discarding the waste, there are usually 3 methods employed, that is composting, landfills, and ingredation. Uh, ingredation. If the usage of raw materials if the usage of raw materials is reduced, the generation of waste also get reduced. Plastic bottles, metal containers, clothes, and many other household items can be reused many times before discarding them. Then rubber rings and other useful item can be made from discarded cycle tubes. So this is how you should be managing the waste, the solid waste, instead of directly disposing it and contaminating the environment. And moreover, the 3R principle, that is reuse, recycle, reduce, helps in saving money, energy, raw materials, and also helps in reducing pollution. So as I have told earlier, for discarding waste, we mainly employ landfills, incineration, and composting. So we'll look into each one separately. First is incineration. Incineration is nothing but it is a hygienic way of disposing solid waste. It is suitable if the waste contains more hazardous material and organic content. This process is most effective process for completely destroying plastic waste and pathogenic medical waste. It is expensive process compared to other methods of waste disposal. It is one of the disadvantage of incineration. The municipal waste are burned at high temperature in big furnaces called incinerators, and the combustible substance such as plastic material, garbage, then a dead organism are separated for burning in the incinerators. The non-combustible materials can be left out for reusing and recycling. About 10% of solid materials and ash remains after combustion, which can be disposed of by other means. So this is all about incineration. Next is composting and combustion. It is a very popular method for disposal of biodegradable waste. During composting, microorganisms like bacteria and fungi decompose the plant and animal waste into organic matter or manure. Waste needs to be separated into biodegradable and non-biodegradable waste before composting. Then biodegradable waste is dumped in underground trenches and covered with old manure and left for decomposition. Organic matter is decomposed by bacteria, and the reuse is finally converted into powdery brown colored mass called compost, which can be used in agriculture as fertilizer, and it is a very efficient fertilizer. So that is all about composting. And next is landfills. Well, in sanitary landfill waste and dumped in many layers of 80 centimeter thick reuse, which is covered with soil of 20 centimeter thickness. Then the decomposition of solid waste generates toxic gases. The solid waste volume shrinks by 25 to 30% after 2 to 3 years. This is the most common and cheapest method of waste disposal and is mostly employed in big countries. It is nothing but it will be covered. These waste will be covered with soil of 20 centimeter thickness, which later after 2 to 3 years, the total volume of the solid waste will shrink to 25 to 30%. This is one of the waste disposal method that is being employed. So that is all about the how to manage the solid waste. Next is the certain initiatives. Well, certain initiatives to reduce the solid waste includes like the 3R principle should be employed. Then solid and liquid waste treatment should be there. Commodity trading, management of waste facilities should be maintained. Technical services should be given. Then monitoring this, how much is the legal practices being employed by the people should be monitored. Then waste logistics. So these are some of the initiatives that is taken by the government in order to control or to reduce the solid waste. Role of an individual in pollution prevention, that is role of an individual in reducing the solid waste or whatever waste, so that it reduces pollution. So we must think globally and act locally, and use eco-friendly products, use rechargeable batteries. We must say no to the excessive use of pesticides, fertilizers, chemicals, paints, etc. Use less or only required quantities of resources. You shouldn't be using in order to satisfy one's greed. No, we must only use according to what is needed. Then plant more trees. We should make the best out from the waste, and also employ the 3R principle, that is reuse, reduce, recycle. So by maintaining or by following all this, we can reduce pollution. So these are some of the images wherein which how to reduce pollution. Now let's talk about climate change. So I'm asking you everyone a question. Does climate change matter? Well, we'll see. Before going directly into climate change, we need to know what is climate as well as what is weather. So the climate is nothing but the climate of a region or city is the typical average weather. So what is weather? Weather is nothing but the day-to-day changes in the state of the atmosphere, and it is short term. That is, it can vary from minute to minute or week, day to day. So it is very short term. So the average of these weathers all together form the climate. So we can say Earth's climate is the average of all world's regional climate. So keeping this in mind, when we talk about climate change, we can say that is typical or the average weather of it is the change in the average weather of a city or a region. Climate change is also change in the Earth's overall climate. This could be change in Earth's average temperature. So when there is a climate change happening, it will change the Earth's temperature also in total. So just we look into what is the difference between a weather and a climate. As we said earlier, weather is a very short-term phenomena wherein which there will be we can see a change in temperature, humidity, and wind in that particular region or a city, and this weather can vary from day to day or minute to minute. As we know, in the morning it may be cloudy, in the night it may be rainy. So in a day itself, there will be change. So that is what is called weather is. The climate of a region is the weather average over many years. So the average of the weather over many years in that particular region is known as climate. And moreover, the climate of a region or a city or the entire planet changes very slowly. These changes takes place in 100-year or 1,000-year scale. So when such changes happens, it affects the Earth's environment or Earth's ecology totally. So that is the main difference between weather and climate. Global warming. So when we talk about global warming, before going into global warming, we need to know what is greenhouse effect. Well, greenhouse effect is the way in which heat is trapped in the Earth's atmosphere by the greenhouse gases. So, which means in a greenhouse, the sunlight enters the Earth's atmosphere and the heat is retained. The greenhouse effect describes a similar phenomena like our planetary scale, but instead of the glass of a greenhouse, here in the Earth's atmosphere, this heat is retained by certain greenhouse gases, which raises the temperature. So, an increase in the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere causes a warming effect in the Earth's surface, which lead to global warming. So we can say the surface of the Earth absorbs just under half of the sun's energy that we know, while the atmosphere absorbs 23% and the rest is reflected back to the space. The natural processes ensures that the amount of incoming and outgoing energy is equal, keeping which maintains the planets or the Earth's atmosphere in equilibrium. However, due to the human activities, there is an increase amount of emissions of the greenhouse gases which gets trapped in the atmosphere. It doesn't get escapes the planet. It gets trapped in the Earth's atmosphere. This energy then returns back to the Earth's surface and is reabsorbed by the Earth. So this, when it is getting reabsorbed, the Earth's climate or the Earth's temperature also increases. Because of more energy entering the planet, the surface temperature increases. So this is a figure, or this is an image which shows greenhouse effect. Now, climate change, when we talk about climate change is influenced by external factors, then anthropogenic factors, as well as natural causes. External factors include solar activity, Earth's orbit, meteorites, and human activities include emission of greenhouse gases, pesticide, land changes, and the natural causes include volcanic eruption. So what we measure the climate change with the help of thermometer, but the actual concern is the consequences that is associated with this climate change. That is the actual concern. So the consequences include the Earth get warmer, more evaporation leads more rain, and the sea level starts to rise, glaciers melting, extreme weather, and because of this sudden changes, it affects the ecosystem, it affects the plants, animals associated with it, and slowly they get to disappear. So from this, we can say that, yes, climate change matters. So it is important that we need to take this issue as a serious issue. We mustn't ignore, because at the end of the day, it is we people who will suffer of all the consequences, knowingly and unknowingly, that we do to the environment. So next is when we talk about ozone layer. So ozone layer, we know it is a blanket that covers the Earth's atmosphere. So nowadays we can observe ozone layer depletion. It is nothing but the thinning of the ozone layer present in the upper atmosphere. This happens mainly due to the chlorine and bromide atoms in the atmosphere, when it comes with the ozone atoms, it will destroy the ozone molecules, which makes the depletion in the ozone layer. The ozone depleting substances include chlorofluorocarbons, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, methyl chloroform, etc. Whereas the ozone depleting substances contain bromine, methyl bromide, hydrobromofluorocarbons. All these are the substances, the ozone depleting substances. And we look into each a little more. Causes of ozone layer depression, ozone layer depletion. So the main responsible causes of ozone layer depletion are the chlorofluorocarbons, the unregulated rocket launches, and nitrogen compounds, natural causes, and also volcanic eruption. Acid rain. Acid rain is also called as acid precipitation or acid deposition. So nothing but when, because of the acidity increase in the atmosphere, and also when it rains, when it comes to the earth's surface, along with this acidity, when the rain comes, it becomes acid rain, which is very harmful to the human and to the lives that are present in the earth, as well as to the monuments, to the livestock, and so on. For everything, acid rain is very very harmful. So this acid rain, we can say that it possesses a pH level of about 5.2 or below it. It is mainly this caused because of the emission of sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides, and which is from human activities, mostly from combustion of fossil fuel. So these are the main causes wherein which acid rain is being found. Effects of climate change. So what are the effects? That is what we are going to look into. Agriculture is extremely vulnerable to climate change because the higher temperature eventually leads to the less yielding of the crop, while it encourages the weeds and the proliferation of the weeds, which in turn over dominates the normal crops and destroy the crops. Changes in precipitation pattern increases the likelihood of short-run crops failures and long-run production declines. Although there will be gains in some crops in some regions of the world, the overall impact of the climate change is drastic to the agriculture sector. Population in the developing world, which are already vulnerable and food insecure, are likely to be the most or seriously affected. Now let's look into different acts. The first act which we will be looking into is the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. So this act, from the name itself, it says it is the protection of the animals, plants, and birds. And also this act extends throughout the India. The main governing bodies of this act is the National Board for Wildlife and State Wildlife Board, Central Zoo Authority, Wildlife Crime Control Bureau, as well as National Tiger Conservation Authority. So the main objective of this Wildlife Protection Act is to prohibition or hunting of the wild animals, then setting up management of national parks and wildlife sanctuaries, as well as control the trade and commerce of wildlife and wildlife products. So these are the main objectives of Wildlife Protection Act. So almost there are 6 schedules that comes in this act, which gives us various degrees of protection. So in the first and second schedule, it is the absolute protection of the wild animals, and if at all these animals are being exploited or misused, they are given the highest penalties. Species listed in Schedule 3 and 4 are also protected, but the penalties are comparatively less when we compare the penalties with the Schedule 1 and 2. Then animals under Schedule 5 is commonly the cows, fruit bats, rat, mice, etc., which is considered to be hunted freely. And moreover, the specific endemic plants is given under Schedule 6, which are prohibited from cultivation and planting. The next act is the Water Act 1974, Prevention and Control Pollution Act. So the main objective of this act is to prevent and control water pollution in order to maintain or restore the wholesome of the purity of the water from the water sources. So the main governing bodies or the statutory bodies of the Water Act is the Central Pollution Control Board and State Pollution Control Board. So these authorities have kept certain standards wherein which how much amount of effluents can be discarded into the water bodies by the industries. The CPCB performs these same function for union territories along with formulating policies related to the prevention of water pollution and coordinating activities with the SPCB. The SPCB controls sewage and industrial effluents discharge by approving, rejecting, and granting consent to this discharge. So this is how CPCB and SPCB works. Next act is the Air Act 1981, which includes the prevention and control of air pollution. So the act targets to control and prevent air pollution in India, and the main objectives are to provide for prevent, control, and abandon of air pollution, to provide for the establishment of boards at the central and state level to implement this act. Again, the CPCB and SPCB are given the responsibilities of the Air Act too. It states that the cause of air pollution are the internal combustion engines, industry, vehicle, power plants, etc., and are not permitted. They are not permitted to release particulate matter, lead, carbon monoxide, then volatile organic matter, or other substance beyond the predetermined limit. So this is the standard kept in regards with preventing or controlling air pollution. So these industries are not allowed to emit these substances in the limit more than the limit which is given. So it empowers the state government to designate air pollution areas. Then the next act which we are going to look into is the Environmental Protection Act 1986. So from the name itself, we get to know that it is for the protection of the environment. The main objectives of this act is to provide protection and improvement to the environment, prevention of hazardous activities to human beings and other creatures in the planet, for prevention and control of environmental pollution, laying standards for increasing the quality of environment, restriction of areas for location of industries, then safeguarding for handling hazardous substances, researches relating to environmental pollution. All these are the objectives of the Environmental Protection Act. The statutory bodies of this act is the Genetic Engineering Appraisal Committee and the National Coastal Zone Management Authority. Next is the Forest Conservation Act. The Forest Conservation Act 1980 is an act by the Parliament of India which ensures the conservation of forest and its resources. It was enacted by the Parliament of India in order to control the ongoing deforestation of the forests in India. It came into force in October 25, 1980 and also contains 5 sections. The main objectives of the Forest Conservation Act 1980 is to preserve the forest ecosystem of India by fulfilling the following objectives. So to protect the forest along with flora and fauna and other diverse ecological components while preserving the integrity and the territory of the forest, arrest the loss of forest biodiversity, prevent forest lands from being converted to agriculture, grazing, and other activities. So these are the main objectives. The features of the Conservation Act 1980 is this act restricts the state government and other authorities to take decision without the permission of the central government. The Forest Conservation Act gives complete authority to the central government to carry out the objectives of this act. The penalties, the act levies the penalties in the case of violation the provision of the FCA. The Forest Conservation Act will have an advisory committee which will help the central government in regards with the forest conservation. So these are the main features of this act. Next is Convention on Biodiversity, that is CBD. It was negotiated and signed by the nations at the Earth Summit at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil in 1992. The convention came into force in December 29, 1993. India became a party to the convention on February 18, 1994. At present, there are 196 parties to this convention. The three major objectives of this biodiversity convention is conservation of biological diversity, sustainable use of resources, equitable benefit arising from the use of these resources, and associated traditional knowledge. Under the convention, there are two protocols. So under this convention, there are two protocols. One is the Cartagena Protocol and the other one is Nagoya Protocol. Till now, we have talked about the acts which is employed and associated with India. Now let's look into the international agreements. The first one is Kyoto Protocol. I hope you have heard about this. Well, Kyoto Protocol was adopted on 11th December 1997. The Kyoto Protocol operationalizes the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change by committing the industrialized countries and economic in transition to limit and reduce greenhouse gases emission in accordance with the agreed individual target. So the main the Kyoto Protocol aims at reducing the greenhouse gases, so in order to save the planet from climate change. The Montreal Protocol on substances related to the depletion of the ozone layer is an international treaty designed to protect the ozone layer by phasing out the production of substance that deplete the ozone layer. It was agreed in 1987 and entered into force on 1989. It has been through a number of revisions. It has gone through a number of revisions, and moreover, the Montreal Protocol has been responsible for phasing out and banning chlorofluorocarbons and hydrochlorofluorocarbons, which is the main components in depleting the ozone layer. So that is all about Montreal Protocol. So we have come to the end of the session. I hope you understood whatever is being taught in this session. With this, I thank all. Thank you and have a wonderful day.